Hello and welcome to this quick tutorial. This video is meant to demonstrate my pattern for star-edged hand towels, available on my website, loveapplecrafts.com. There's a link in the description to download this simple free pattern. It's a great way to learn or practice Tunisian honeycomb stitch and to learn how to transition between this and a regular crochet border. So as usual, start with a slip knot, but here I like to attach a locking stitch marker to one of the loops of the slip knot as I'm tightening it. This is just because later when we do the finishing, we're going to be undoing that slip knot, and the marker makes it slightly easier to do so, arguably. Then simply make a foundation chain in the number indicated for your yarn. The pattern gives you 4 different numbers for 4 different yarn weights. Here I'm using the very thick Estelle suds, so I'm going to chain exactly 61 times. To make the first star stitch of the border, you're going to pull up loops in the first 5 back bumps of the chain, starting as you normally would in the second back bump from the hook. So pulling up a loop in the second back bump and the third, and as you do this, you're keeping all the loops on the hook. So you do that a total of 5 times, and you should end up with 6 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through all 6 loops and then chain 1 to finish the star stitch, and that creates the eye of the star stitch. Next, work regular star stitches the rest of the way across the chain by pulling up a loop in the eye, another loop in the leftmost leg of the previous star stitch, and then from the space at the base of that leg, and then in each of the next 2 back bumps of the chain. As usual, you should have 6 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through 6 and chain 1 to finish. If you have any trouble with star stitch and you have no idea what I'm doing, there is a link in the description which breaks down the anatomy of a star stitch in detail and teaches you how to do that. So basically, you're just going to continue working these star stitches all the way down the chain, always working into the back bumps of the chain. Each star stitch advances you 2 bumps down the line. And that's what the first 3 look like. Here I am close to the end. So I'm just going to show you working the last one, which should be number 28 for the weight of yarn that I've selected. Working into the last 2 back bumps, pulling up loops, yarn over, pull through 6, and chain 1. And you'll see you have 1 back bump remaining. That's deliberate. That's just to give you a little bit of room when you do the finishing. So just leave that one hanging, turn the work, and move on. I like to swing the working yarn around to the right to get it to the back at this point. You don't have to do that, but I tend to. I like the way it looks. Start the next row with the chain 2. Now work 1 half double crochet into the eye of the first star stitch of the row, which is right on the right hand edge. Then you're going to work 2 half double crochets into the eye of each star stitch all the way to the end of the row. So just make sure you're working right into the eye and work 2 half double crochets into each one all the way down. If you can't see the eyes, just pull on the fabric a little bit and they tend to pop right out at you. So this part is straightforward. I'll skip to the end and just make sure at the end that you do work 2 half doubles into the very last star stitch eye. Then join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain from the previous round. It's a little bit tight to get into. You can sort of see the 2 arms of that chain, the very top of it there between my fingers. It does tend to be a little bit tight. Watch me struggle to get into it. Use your fingernails. I'll just kind of gloss that over a little bit because I had some trouble. There we go. And join with a slip stitch. Now we're going to turn the work once again, and I always, again, wrap the yarn around to the back around the right-hand side, and we're going to switch to a Tunisian crochet hook. So just put the Tunisian hook right into the same loop, and we're going to try to conserve this nice line of sideways V's that runs across the top of these half double crochets by working into the back loop of each half double crochet. So turn the work towards you slightly, insert the hook into the back loop of the second half double crochet, and pull up a loop. Of course, because we're doing Tunisian now, keeping it on the hook. So here I am just inserting the hook into the back loop of those half double crochets. Hopefully you can see or you're familiar with half double crochet so you know those are the two front loops and this is the back loop. So if you're using the Estelle suds, like I am, you should do this exactly 63 times. Here's what it looks like as you go along, and here we are almost at the end. Keep working into all of the half double crochets, and the very last loop you pull up should be into the top of the starting chain 2 from the previous row, which you can identify by sort of pulling on it a little bit. So just pull things out a bit so that you can see what's going on and work somewhere into that chain. It doesn't really matter exactly where. Just make sure you do work one extra after the last half double crochet and pull up a loop. Now it's time to work the Tunisian return pass, which is always worked exactly the same way. Yarn over, pull through 1 loop on the hook, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And keep yarning over and pulling through 2 stitches until you have 1 remaining on the hook. You'll do that after every forward pass, and it's always worked the same way. For the remainder of the body of the towel, we're going to work in Tunisian honeycomb stitch, which is where you alternate 1 Tunisian simple and 1 Tunisian purl stitch all the way down the row. This is a very simple and beautiful textured stitch. If you're not familiar with it, I did put a link in the description to another one of my videos that will make you an expert in Tunisian honeycomb. But basically you're working 1 simple and 1 purl until you get to the end. Just remember when you get to the end of every forward pass, always work the Tunisian final stitch the same way, regardless of where you land in the alternating simple purl stitch pattern. So just turn the work towards you slightly so that you can identify that V that goes up the edge of the work under both loops and draw up a loop. That's the Tunisian final stitch. Then work the return pass in the usual way. For the next round, because we started the last round with a simple stitch, we're going to start with a purl stitch. And the best way to remember that is just to learn how to identify purl stitches and simple stitches within the fabric so that you always know you're supposed to work a purl into a simple and a simple into a purl. And I recommend just repeating those 2 rows until the hand towel measures around 25 inches from the bottom edge. You can make it longer if you want. And then you're ready to start the star stitch border along the top. So switch back when you're finished to a regular crochet hook and simply work a single crochet into each Tunisian stitch across. So to do that, just work into the stitches the same way you do for Tunisian crochet. Insert the hook from right to left into each vertical bar and work a single crochet. Here I am at the end. Always remember to work the last single crochet into the Tunisian final stitch in the usual way. You should end up with a total of 63 single crochets. Now at this point I like to cut the yarn and then move over to the top right corner of the towel and reattach the yarn to the side chain. The reason I do this is because I don't like the way the star stitches look for the border if you work them from the wrong side of the work. If you're not overly bothered by that, you don't have to do it. You can just keep working back and forth in regular rows, but this is what I like to do. So cut the yarn, move over to the top right. You can see that this is just a sample swatch. It's very short. I like to attach to the side chain. So you can identify that just by identifying the first single crochet and its 2 loops, and then just go one below that sort of into the side. Probably you should insert from front to back. I'm not sure why I did it from back to front. It doesn't really matter, but I do recommend doing it the other way around. I think it looks a little better. And just leave a long enough tail to weave it in at the end. So now we're just going to start the next row by chaining 3 and work a star stitch by pulling up loops in the second and third back bumps of that chain 3. The third one is a little bit difficult to identify. And I'm not sure that I grabbed the right thing there, but it doesn't really matter. Pull up loops then in each of the first 3 single crochets of the row, but I recommend inserting the hook not under the 2 loops of the top of the single crochet as you normally would, but into the back bumps. So even a single crochet has a back bump. If you flip the work forward, you can identify it immediately behind the other 2 loops that you normally work under. Doing this allows you to, again, leave that unbroken line of V's sort of marching along the edge of your star stitch border, and it makes it match the bottom. So just pull up a loop in each of those first 3 back bumps until you have 6 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through 6 and chain 1 as you normally would to complete your star stitch. So this is what the first one looks like. It has sort of a little chain on the right hand side, which makes a nice finished look. So then we're going to star stitch across. So pull up a loop in the eye, the leftmost leg, the space at the base of that leg, and then each of the next 2 back bumps of the next 2 single crochets down the row. So they're a little bit tight and harder to get into, but I think it's worth taking the extra time to do it that way, because as you can see, we're leaving that row of sideways V's that just creates a nice separation from the honeycomb section to the star stitch section, and it matches what it looks like on the bottom, where we did the same thing into our half double crochets. So keep working in star stitch all the way across, continuing to work into those back bumps. Here I am almost at the end. I'm working star stitch number 31, and at the very end it will seem like you don't have enough room for another star stitch, but you have to squeeze one in anyway, just to make sure that the edge ends up nice and straight. So here's what I do. I'll finish star stitch number 31 here. And then take a look. Here we have the yarn tail that we cut off. So I'm just going to start the star stitch and work it as usual for the first 3 legs. And then for the 4th leg, I'm just going to pull that last stitch over, and you can see that there's a pretty typical looking back bump that you can work into for the 4th leg there. So pull up a loop in that. And then basically I'm just going to work the final leg of the star stitch into the side chain. So here, if you turn it towards you, you can see a pretty obvious sort of V, upside down V, 2 loops there that you can work under. They are a little tight. And pull up a loop there. So right into the edge of the project, kind of like you would for the Tunisian final stitch. And pull through 6 and chain 1, and you're finished that row. So turn the work around. Swing the yarn around to the right, as we always do. This final row is very easy. Start by chaining 1 and then working 1 single crochet into the star stitch eye right on the edge. Then work 2 single crochets into the eye of each star stitch across. So remember to just identify those eyes by pulling on the fabric and work 2 single crochets into each eye across. Here we are almost at the end, and it's straightforward. Just work 2 single crochets into the last eye and then join with another slip stitch to the top of the side chain. Wherever it looks good to you, this looks like the top of the chain to me, so I'm going to work into that. And we're finished, which brings us to my least favorite part of any project, the finishing. I usually don't demonstrate any finishing in my videos because I'm real bad at it and I hate it. But the finishing is important for this project. So start by just cutting the tail where you were and pulling it through, leaving it about 10 inches long for later. And then travel to the bottom left corner, and that's where we'll start. Here we place that marker in our slip knot. Try to undo that slip knot if you can. It's not easy, and the marker doesn't really make it much easier. So here I am, I've undone part of the slip knot, and then I just kind of pick up a loop sort of within the remaining slip knot, and I decide I'm not happy with that, so then I decide to just undo the last part of that slip knot. And I do encourage you to do this. The slip knot just doesn't look good on the bottom corner there, so get rid of it, which is sort of a 2-step process. Then just insert your hook under both loops of sort of the most recent stitch there, and what we're going to do is we're going to work something that I call the backwards slip stitch. So just turn the hook the opposite way that you would normally go, so working from left to right instead of right to left. And what we're going to do is we're going to work 2 or 3 slip stitches in this backwards direction up the side of that corner star stitch, because we're trying to create a row of V's or chains that look similar to the bottom right hand side. So this is kind of what you end up with. It sort of looks like a chain. It's not perfect, but it looks slightly better than it did before. So then just pull the yarn through and work an invisible join, which involves threading a tapestry needle and simply identifying kind of the first nice looking V marching up the left-hand side of the project there. There it is there between my fingers. And then just put the tapestry needle under both loops of that nice looking V that we've identified. Pull it through. And then what we're trying to do is create sort of a new slip stitch between the one that my working yarn is coming out of and that one that I worked under. So just kind of pull it tight or around to the length of a typical slip stitch, and then insert the tapestry needle back through the middle of the stitch that the working yarn was coming out of. And pull it through. So there we sort of have this, I guess, extra V that we've created using our invisible join. So let's go to the top left corner and do the same thing. I don't like the way that raw star stitch edge looks with that sort of loose eye there. So again, we're going to pick up a loop somewhere in the chain along the edge. And in the similar way that we did on the other side, remember we wrapped the yarn around. So that kind of creates a similar look, the way I did that there. And then just, again, go to our backwards slip stitch and work 2 or 3 of those along the edge of the star stitch eye. It doesn't really matter exactly where you insert the hook, but just insert it sort of below the eye once and pull it right through in the middle of the stitch that you had on the hook, as I'm doing there, and then eventually insert it into the eye, and then maybe into the corner above the eye, as I'm doing here with great difficulty. Ultimately, you know what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to create the look of a chain up the side of the eye to make it look a bit more finished. So just cut the yarn, pull it through, and thread it once again onto a tapestry needle and work what I call the invisible join, but I think it's probably better called the seamless join. I really feel like I shouldn't be demonstrating this, so if anyone has a better way to do this, any finishing wizards out there who would like to leave me a comment on this video, if anyone actually makes it this far into the video, feel free. I welcome any suggestions. Finishing is not my forte. Fortunately, the top right and bottom right corners are pretty good as they are, so you can just weave the ends in and you don't have to do too much with those. So I hope that was somewhat helpful. Please feel free to download the free pattern from my website. Thank you for watching.